lots of networking, lots of schools, school visits, nursery visits, a little bit like Sue, really. Do quite a lot. Love my job.
All right. How nice. Thank you so much, Miss Karen. So Miss Karen is doing something that's really, really important for the world, because research in early childhood education is a very, very important part of the entire space and the ecosystem of early childhood education. And it should not be, and we should actually learn how to do more and more research and go deeper into this thing, and also bring about the change based on the data-driven research that we have done, and not exactly just on based on our experiences, because experiences would differ from person to person, place to place. But if we are very pro in doing our research and actually doing a data-driven kind of a practice in early childhood education, we can make a lot of difference in the world of the ECC space. So thank you, Ms. Karen, for doing something so wonderful. Over to you, Ms. Pam. You are on mute, darling.
Good evening, everyone. This is probably going to be a hard act to follow with the great platform that is here. This is my first time with the forum. Thank you, Sue Allingham, for the invitation. So I am also from near London in England. My background has been in early years for a good part of 30 years. I didn't start my career in education. I did a degree in chemistry, then moved into financial services. And then when I had my daughter, I became very much interested, obviously, in education, but particularly early childhood development. So I started my career in Montessori education, went on to early years teaching. So I've done a variety of things, still do a variety of things, training, so deliver and write my own training, work on the early years teacher training program here in England. I've done that for about 15 years. My specialism is actually in special educational needs. So that has been my sort of the main part of my role for the good 15 years. But coming out of that now and sort of trying to sort of widen my horizons and making my contacts, and hence being here to sort of share my experiences, but also draw on everybody else's, and sort of that collaborative working, which I feel is very, very important, to share that knowledge and expertise, but also draw on other people's knowledge and expertise as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right, that's really wonderful. And thank you for Ms. Pam for introducing herself. And she's done such a multiple different variety of things, which of course, it adds on to your experience as a person and the work that you do, and for the people around you as well. So very, very important to actually share knowledge and, always have a good network of people around you, because like I said, we always get different perspective from all the educators and the leaders that are around us. We share our experiences, we gain from their experiences. So that's something very wonderful that Ms. Pam is doing. Yeah, children definitely do get us started on the early childhood journey, because once we are a mother, we feel that, am I doing everything right? First and foremost is that's the first fear. And then we want to know more about it. And the second thing is that when we see around there's not too much happening around the world around for milestones, then we do take up that step of actually making that difference. So welcome, Ms. Pam.
Thank you.
Ms. Baiba.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am from a very small European country, Latvia, and actually I am a professional mix, because I am clinical psychologist, I'm educational psychologist, I'm Montessori pedagogue, PhD in education science, and a lot of therapy fields. What I do, I created social enterprise with an aim to help children to have environment what meets our digital children brain needs. So that means I founded kindergarten, I founded developmental center, and a methodology that helps children to involve movements and balance into classrooms, into lessons, in curriculum, in the speech therapy. Yes, and I think I've been working with children more than 25 years. And I remember I started from Sunday school. I was Sunday school teacher when I was only 19.
Oh, wow.
And then I started to create this SOS Children Village youth facility. And I was a mom. I was 26-year old, and I was a mom for 12 children who has no family, who has no mother or father. Yeah, so I think my life is all around the children and development of people.
Wow, that's fantastic, Ms. Baiba. So Ms. Pam is working for special needs, and you are working at the time, at 19 in a Sunday school, and then, at 26, she was handling those children who really needed her the most. So when you're having a developmental center, when we're talking about movement and balance in an early childhood education system, it's so important that most of the time parents and educators overlook the vestibular sense or the proprioceptive growth of the child, the balance and the kind of core strength or the knowing your body and, how do you move around is so important. And these kind of like speech therapy and the activity therapy is occupational therapies are actually helping these young ones much more than that we realize. And so many times we find that the difficulty is of parents accepting the fact or, going in for these kind of activities for their children. So that's another education that we have to do carry on time again. Welcome, Ms. Baiba. Over to Ms. Fatima. And Ms. Fatima, I'm so proud of you for getting that background right now. So it's like you are with that background, and I'm so happy for you. So can you
Actually,
please?
thanks to my granddaughter.
Exactly, the Gen Z, the granddaughter children, and the children and the grandchildren are always way ahead in technology than we all are, and put together.
So,
That is so.
so the
So
iPad
yes,
is hers. The iPad is hers. The room is hers. She's locked her room and she says, Grandma, go in there. And
wow.
she put me on the platform. She's 22. I have 12 grandchildren, by the way.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's
Yes,
amazing.
yes. My oldest grandchild is, and I got bits and pieces of you people talking before that. And yes, I'm a cricket fanatic. So as soon as I, get off this line, I'm going into cricket. I want to watch the T20 World Cup, and
World
I'm sure
final,
everybody
yes.
is looking. So I am actually, I feel I was a mother since I was very little. Even when my mother used to host all the um, I don't know if you will understand the term, but we used to call them mamambogas, the ladies who used to sell vegetables in a very small suburban area in Nairobi, in Pangani, where the children used to come, and they used to come with their mothers to work, and they would have nothing to do. So I would sit with them, teach them rhymes, and whatever I had learned at school, I would teach them. And I always wanted to be a nurse, I thought. But this is one part of nursing, or
Yes,
rather, a larger part of nursing, because a nurse is a mother, yeah, and a teacher.
correct.
So after that, I went into insurance. I got married, and I want to do so much more. I went into accounting, and then my husband, I cannot take anything away from him. He actually told me that, I used to teach the street children. Yeah, I used to just treat the street children whenever I had the time because he was Rotary head. So I used to teach the street children. And he says, you know what? You're so good at teaching. Why don't
Hmm.
you go into teaching? And that's when I embarked on my journey. I did my Montessori when my child was in A levels.
Okay.
My son was in A levels. And this was 1997.
Oh,
Yeah, 1997. My child was in his A levels, and I did my Montessori, and I've been with Montessori Learning Center ever since for 29 years now into
wow.
Montessori, and I'm the kindergarten head there. And I love it. However, listening to all these lovely ladies around, the amount they're doing, I feel I restricted myself in one corner, and the Baibas out there, and I mean, all the girls, Dr. Sue Allen out there, all of you. I want to really take inspiration from you and touch the world, a larger world, rather than just my little old cocoon.
Awesome. That's some journey, Miss Fatima. And you, of course not. You're not in one corner, and you've not actually restricted yourself at all. In fact, you are doing the work, and you are at a place where I think those people need you the most. And being ahead in the Montessori right now, where you had started teaching, it's some commendable thing,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
And you're making all the difference. And then we have ECDF as a forum to bring all of us together. So
Yes.
if you want to network and you want to do more and we want to reach out more to people, this is where we are. And of course, I'll not invite Dr. Vasvi to introduce herself because I'll introduce her. She is the chairperson for the DN Foundation, who's doing wonderful work for the backward, sections of the society in India, for women and for children. She is the chairperson for Early Child Development Forum. That's the ECDF, which brings us all together. And she keeps doing marvelous stuff and events. And her motto is to bring all the educators from around the world together so that we can exchange ideas and you can do much more in the early childhood education space. And she's quietly behind the powerhouse behind all of these. And she also has a chain of free schools called Tender Petals, which is running quite successfully. It's a franchise chain. And she belongs to the northern eastern part of the India, where her presence and her work is absolutely required. It's a necessity. It is an essential that she's there in that part of India, and she's doing some fabulous job. So that's about her. So I'm not calling her. Can you come and introduce yourself? About me. So I'm your moderator for the day. My name is Smriti Agarwal. I've been in the early childhood space for the past 3 decades now. So 30 years since I became a teacher, and that was quite by chance. But then I fell in love with this profession, and I fell in love with the children and the teachers, and how much can we do in this area. So in the early childhood education space, I have done everything, right from teaching to being a class head and a school head as a principal, making curriculum, designing things, writing poems. I'm a published children's storybook author as well.
Wow.
And all my books have stories which are very, very inspiring for the children, and they have a lot to learn from those. Because though I think stories is the best way that children can learn. So I do a lot of programs and curriculums, and my curriculums are all different. Right now, I am the founder director of my own space called Smriti Ka Shiksha Sutra, and which definitely means that Smriti, my name, and Shiksha Sutra is a Sanskrit word which actually means a guiding thread of education. So making and designing a lot of different programs and curriculums for schools and enabling and empowering the teachers by teacher training. And so those are little things that I want to do, and I want to create that space. And I'm so glad to be here on Women's Day talking to all the wonderful women here. So clap for all of you. And let's now begin our journey of discussion and sharing thoughts. And let's see who's going first. So let's start with Miss Pam. So, Miss Pam, who benefits most when women lead educational institutions, and how does that leadership ripple into families and communities? So basically, what happens is that this is this one more gender bias to the entire thing, especially in the Asian countries, that early childhood education space is all about women. We don't allow men in that. Yeah. Usually, we are the ones who are complaining about gender biases, but this is one space where right now, what we see is usually the bias is towards the men. They are not allowed in. So we want to talk about the educational leadership in the early childhood space. And then, all those leadership qualities, how does that ripple into families and personal space as well? So as a woman and sharing your experiences, what do you think about it? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I when I saw this question, it immediately jumped out to me, and as you say, Smriti, it's as a South Asian woman, particularly, and growing up in a country, and I'd had this conversation with a colleague literally just last week, and he said to me, we were talking about growing up as a second generation, immigrant. And kind of being stuck between two worlds, really, the ideologies, sort of, what our parents wanted us, what they expected us to do, but also, what the society that we were growing up in. So I sort of started to think about just a very simple image I wanted to sort of, maybe others can relate to this, was being a young girl sitting in a classroom, you know, all 50, 55, 60 years ago, I'll say that quietly, watching quite carefully, maybe not saying much, you know. My parents moved into a very middle class, very white British town, a very small town. They didn't head for the bigger towns where all the other Asians were heading at the time. They chose a very small town, and the reason for that was there was a big car manufacturing plant there, so they felt they could get work. My grandfather, his uncle, you know, his brother, sorry, my uncles, all of them. And I may not have even fully understood what leadership meant at that time, but I was observing, I was watching. And I was noticing who was speaking with authority, you know, who makes the decisions. You know, we were told these are head teachers, this is the teacher, this is the cook. So, you know, people started to sort of have a little bit of a hierarchy in your mind as well. You know, who stands at the front of the room? And, you know, our parents very much brought us up that teachers are God. You know, this is the person that you look up to. But also the whole, you know, our whole school was white British teachers. There was no diversity. There was very little diversity in the children as well. You know, the friends I grew up with at that time were still very good friends 60 years later, because we migrated towards each other because it was comforting. And I think it was in that sort of quiet sort of observation that you start to form a belief about what is possible for you. And then, you know, thinking about that, I thought when women lead those educational institutions, that belief starts to shift. And as a South Asian woman sort of serving in a senior leadership position, which wasn't easy to come to, you know, to get to, I've learned that leadership is never neutral. You know, who leads shapes what's prioritized, you know, who feels visible, whose voices are heard, and whose experiences are actually understood. And especially in special educational needs. And I'll come on to that in a minute. And that first sort of ripple of women's leadership reaches children. And for me, I thought representation matters not just as symbolism, you know, it matters as psychology as well. You know, reaching out to my families, to the communities that I'm working in, continue to have worked with. So when that young girl sees a woman who shares her cultural heritage, sort of leading with confidence and clarity, I think leadership becomes imaginable and it feels attainable. And I think that's her having now sort of a granddaughter, you know, nieces, great nieces, and they all look to me. You know, my niece has come to me for educational advice. It's quite scary as well. And, you know, my niece often says to me, Chachi, which means auntie, you know what? You're amazing. You've done this. You've had kids and, you know, you've really sort of pushed yourself forward. But also I thought for young boys, you know, something equally important happens when they see that female authority becomes normal. You know, respect becomes instinctive. And again, that was really important in our community to have that for that mind shift of what is achievable for women. And that normalization shapes the men that they will become as well. That was really important. But then I thought, well, visibility is only the beginning. So many sort of women lead with that sort of relational lens, I think. You know, we kind of lead from the heart more, don't we? And I think, I can't remember who it said, it was because we've been mothers, or we are, you know, those sort of female roles. We understand that belonging comes from achievement. And that child who does not feel safe cannot truly thrive. You know, that inclusion is not an initiative, it is a value system. So then thinking about my work within SEND sort of leadership, I have seen sort of how transformative that can be. You know, inclusion, it can't sit on those sort of margins of the strategy, because we hear all about strategy, policy makers, don't we? Sue's nodding now, especially in England here. You know, I'm not as familiar with international sort of policies and strategies. You know, inclusion can't sit on the margins of that strategy. It must sit at the center of culture. You know, that's really, really important for me. And when we, as leaders, we really prioritize inclusion, it influences everything, doesn't it? It influences the curriculum, staff development, which is a lot of us are here, why we're here, family engagement, you know, and even how success is actually defined. So inclusion for me becomes a lived practice, not just policy language. And sometimes I might have got myself into trouble with that, because I kind of challenge what might be out there. And Sue's nodding as well, because Sue and I have had many conversations about this, haven't we? And I think that's why we connected so well. Then that ripple extends to families. You know, so the children first, then those families. And in many South Asian communities, education is deeply sacred. You know, we were told education is the platform for everything. It represents opportunity, it represents sacrifice, generational progress. And we're seeing that more and more now, aren't we, as we've progressed. But alongside that sort of reverence, there also can be silence. And I think silence around additional needs, around mental health, around difference. You know, and I think that's been, you know, being particularly specialising in special educational needs and disabilities, I've really learnt that, and especially in communities which, you know, it isn't spoken about, it's hidden, you know, and it's actually getting underneath those layers. So, you know, understand that silence, because I've lived within that culture, and I continue to live within that culture. So I understand that sort of unspoken fear that a label may limit a child's future. You know, the concern about community perception. You know, we've dealt with many safeguarding issues around that. Sort of the weight of expectation carried by children from a very young age. And I carried that expectation and continue to do so, I think. So when I sit with families, you know, I don't lead with authority first. You know, I lead with understanding. So instead of saying, you know, there is a problem, I think it's rephrasing that and saying there is potential. You know, and here is how we unlock it. So instead of confronting that resistance, we build trust. And trust changes everything. I know the sort of relationships I've built because of that trust with the families. You know, they particularly reach out and ask for you because you can relate to them. So when families actually feel respected rather than judged, they engage differently. You know, they ask questions earlier. You know, they seek support sooner. They become partners rather than just those recipients of services, of policy. And this is where culturally sort of intelligent leadership, I think, creates bridges. And which is why this, you know, I was quite excited about sort of making connections here, because there's such, you know, an international platform here of developing those bridges. And as South Asian women in leadership, many of us sort of navigate two worlds. We understand professional systems, but we also sort of understand that community nuance. We speak policy language, but we also speak the language of lived experiences. And that bridging role is not always visible. And it's very difficult, I think, personally. But I think it's really powerful, which really excites me, just hearing about people already today. And there is another ripple, one that's quieter, I think, but it's just as deeply significant. And that's for many sort of South Asian women stepping into senior leadership, sort of challenges generational sort of narratives. You know, perhaps we were taught to prioritise sort of modesty over visibility, you know, to support rather than to lead, you know, to stay within boundaries that were never clearly stated, but always understood. And I think for me, that was probably more so than for my daughter, because we allowed her more of that, you know, sort of go out and challenge the world. And yet, I think here we are, you know, we're leading institutions, we're shaping culture, we're influencing systems, you know, and our presence alone begins to actually shift expectations. It tells our daughters that ambition and cultural identity can coexist. You know, it tells our sons that leadership community, not opposites. And it tells our communities that women's authority is not an exception. It's an asset, and I think I really do truly believe that. And then the last bit of that is that ripple down into the community itself. So when women lead those educational institutions, those institutions become more than places of instruction. They become anchors of support, they become spaces of dialogue, they become hubs of well-being. And that last one is really important, those hubs of well-being, I think, because if you don't have that well-being, and we know for children, emotional well-being is really the anchor to learning, isn't it? Because many women sort of lead with that collective responsibility, don't we? We do not ask only how does this child succeed, but we also ask how does that family flourish. And a lot of work, I do, particularly in my role, it is with families as well. It's not just with the children, it's not just with the educators and the policymakers, it's with the families. And when families flourish, the communities strengthen. And the impact, I think, is not immediate, it is generational. And that's becoming even more important, I think, as we move through sort of the multi-generations, that especially sort of immigration as well. So it's seen in the child who grows up believing leadership is within reach, in the parent who no longer feels shame asking for support. They are coming forward, they're starting to really understand what that means. And also in the staff, the staff member who feels empowered rather than directed. I was doing some safeguarding training on cultural understanding, sort of being culturally sensitive, but at the same time having our safeguarding hat on as well. So when we ask who benefits most, going back to that question right at the beginning, who benefits most when women lead educational institution, I thought, God, this is expansive. I could go on all day. The children benefit, the families benefit, the communities benefit, future generations benefit. Yeah. But I think what's deeper is that when women lead with that authenticity, cultural awareness, and an unwavering commitment to inclusion, leadership becomes transformational rather than positional. And that's important. So just returning right at the end to that little girl in that classroom, the one who's watching quietly. So she may not remember every lesson that was taught, but she'll remember what leadership looked like. And I can still remember those teachers, those people who've influenced me throughout my career, throughout my personal life, in every step. And if what she sees is strength and compassion in the same place, in the same space, authority, cultural pride coexisting, that confidence without apology, because I think I've spent a lot of my time, my life, my career apologizing to people, almost apologizing for where I am or what I can do.
Yes, Ms.
And
Pam,
maybe
you're
hiding a little bit
absolutely
in the
right.
shadows.
Yeah, I know. That's really something, because thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
That's
Because
it. So yeah, that was mine. So it's just that
thank
seeing that change in that girl's sort of sense of possibility is really important.
correct,
So we don't
correct,
change
correct.
one life, we change a generation.
Absolutely.
All right.
Those were indeed, it's the best start for the Women's Day webinar that we're having today, because Ms. Pam covered so many beautiful areas where, as South Asian women, what we feel, what are our boundaries. We're always having these lines drawn for us. Do we actually, reach the higher leadership? And if we do, then what happens? Then how does it ripple to the families and to the communities? It's so beautifully explained by Ms. Pam that, yeah, because we are leading not when the other girls and the younger generation see women leaders lead with clarity and confidence, and which are culturally relevant, and she's not apologetic about being a leader. In fact, she's very proud of making those changes in the community. That inspires the generations to come to actually, make their own boundaries and not go by the ones that has been created for them by the society since a very long time. So yes, a beautiful effect. And of course, the children who need some extra help and the parents feeling empowered to come for that help, trusting the women leaders of their communities and making all the difference. So thank you so much, Ms. Pam, for doing that and, giving us that head start. Really awesome it was.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank
all
you.
the other speakers are going to be thinking about what do we talk about? Let's see. So, but your question leads me to another question that is to Ms. Fatima. So, Ms. Fatima, why do you think women's leadership is especially critical in shaping the future of education? And like I said in the beginning, particularly in the early years. So, your women leadership in education, why do you think is so critical? What is their role? And especially in early childhood education, and you have had the entire experience to talk about it. So over to you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Honestly, what a beautiful question. Yet, Pam has answered most of it. She had so much out there, Well done, Pam. That was beautiful. And there's a famous saying, I think, when she was talking about, when you educate a woman, you educate a whole community. So I want to first make a disclaimer. This is nothing against men. I love all the men in my life, and they play a big part in my life. From my father to my son to my friends to my sons and to my grandsons, they all play a very vital role. However, remember, there are lots of people who address God like as He, right? But Mother Nature is a woman. The instinct, the motherly nature, the nurturing. That's why it's so critical that we are in that position. It's very critical. Men are wonderful. They're wonderful backers, they're wonderful standers, they're wonderful movers and shakers. However, even if I think of Prophet Muhammad, his backbone was Khadija, his wife, and she gave everything. So it's critical to have them there. We cannot do it without men, but definitely men cannot do it without us. They cannot recreate or they cannot reproduce without us. So there's not a competition. It's just telling you why it's critical in shaping future of the education, particularly in early years. It's because a very wise woman once told me, this is a quote from my own daughter, who is also a Montessorian. She says, the way in which we educate comes from a deep space of mercy and care. The way in which we educate comes from a deep space of mercy and care, which by default creates safe spaces for growth. And just now you were talking about safeguarding. Yeah. A woman actually, a motherly instinct, it's in our DNA to think of this safe space. I'm not saying men don't think about it, but they need to be trained about it. And when we are nurturing them, we're naturally, nurturers. We're Mother Nature, helpers of Mother Nature. And you said, women are more vocal. I like what Malala said, Yusuf Azi. She says that if people were silent, nothing would change. I love that. And in a male-dominating society, if anybody made a change in the Afghani world, was Malala. Why? Because she thought differently. She thought community. She didn't think her, me, myself, and I. She thought largely for nurturing benefit mindsets, and that's beautiful. Yeah. I don't have too much more to say. And, we women love talking. So we're naturally, teachers, naturally, whether we're in the kitchen or we're in a, I love to watch cricket. It's a male-dominated fan following. Now I can see a lot of women. But ever since I was a little girl, my father took me to these matches. My brothers played cricket. I was the loudest mouth there, I promise you. And I made the ground come alive. Now I'm itching to go back to see what the frenzy is outside with all my grandchildren waiting for the T20 World Cup cricket. Yeah. So it's important. Look at this early childhood. I mean, me as a grandmother. Why is it particularly important that I nurture my grandchildren like this? It's because of the norms that we have created, the stigma that we have created, with women that, oh, they need to be protected, oh, they can't do much, oh, they can't do that. So now the world is changing. However, we need to be careful and draw the line that we don't go the other way, that we don't start bullying men now. Yeah. So it's important that we hold these leadership positions, especially in early childhood, to nurture benefit mindsets. Smriti, thank you so much. I know it's very short, but I think I've said a lot. Pam has said a lot, and I will keep listening to you, but I'm going to switch off my mic and my camera so that I can keep an eye, but you can't keep an eye on me. That's how women are clever.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Fatima, for sharing those wonderful thoughts with us. And yeah, in a few words, you've said a lot. So the way you have compared the protector or the guider and the mother nature and women being instinctively creating those spaces and being the nurturers. Yeah, and you were very right in saying that it's not that men can't do it, but they have to be trained for it. Whereas I think we are pro-natural at it, and that it comes instinctively to us. And I love the quote of your daughter. It's like actually there. So very, very, very profound words were there. It is like you're educating and you're creating spaces with mercy and care. Two very, very important words for early childhood education. Because if you talk about the Maslow's hierarchy also, when we talk about the physiological, the base of the pyramid, and then coming to safety and belonging. So those are the very, very prime essentials for a child at that age. And that can only ensure learning to happen in a better manner. So, if we know women are the leaders, especially in education, like Miss Pam said, like Miss Fatima said, they are the ones who are going to create that ripple effects of actually building those trust and nurturing in the society, in the families, in world at large, as well
Sorry,
as that.
Smriti.
Yeah.
Smriti, can I just take
Add on.
just a minute? Just a
Yes.
minute. No, I would be unfair if I didn't thank you and Vasavi especially, who said, come on, get on it, get on it. When I told her, when I wanted to back away, she didn't let me back away. And thank you so much, Vasavi. You're
Thank you so
part of
much
my
for being
growth.
there.
Love
I
you.
really
Take
was.
care.
Yeah,
Take
I
care.
know. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I wish
Thank
you all
you.
the best. Please go back to your cricket and yeah, keep an eye on us. We'll not be seeing you, but we'll miss
I'm
you.
also going into the kitchen. It's going to be iftar time soon. So, yes.
Yeah, right. Happy Ramadan month to you, Miss Fatima. All the very best. Thank you so much. All right. So many things spoken about women leadership, and Miss Fatima also told us about the nurturing nature of women. So let me go directly to England to Dr. Sue Allingham and see that, and talk to her about what kind of stereotypes do women in early childhood leadership commonly face, and how can we collectively reframe that narrative. So usually it is like what Ms. Pam was also saying, breaking and coming out of those boundaries or the things that have been decided for us as stereotypes that we often face. So, Dr. Sue, over to you. How do we change this narrative and how can we do it collectively from all parts of the world that we are here right now, thanks to Dr. Wasabi?
Well, it's a bit like, how do you follow Pam and Fatima? But okay. Fatima, if you're still listening, you will be very relieved to know that yesterday I was speaking at a conference in Nottingham, and in the other bit of the conference venue, there was a conference about children in cricket, and it was equally girls and boys in their uniforms, their outfits. So you'll be very pleased to know it was girls and boys. Okay, this was a really interesting one for me. A bit like when Pam said her question jumped out to her. This one jumped out to me. I've reflected a lot in the last 2 or 3 days about where I am in my role in early childhood, or even in teaching in general, actually. And a lot of my reflection has been around this question, but it was reinforced by reading a proof copy of a friend's book, which is due to be published in the summer. So I'll be referencing a bit of that as well. And also somebody asked me, why did I become a teacher? And right back 100 years ago, when I was maybe 6 or 7, I'm also an elderly grandma. I had, although I'm a bit older than Pam, I hated school with an absolute passion, hated it, because I was always told I wasn't good enough, I wasn't clever enough, I didn't know things. I was picked on because I couldn't do maths very well. And my teachers picked on me, male teachers. I don't have to possibly even tell you that, but it might be an easy guess. Male teacher picked on me, made me humiliated in front of the class every Monday morning back in the long time ago when we had different coinage system and I couldn't add up the dinner money, and he made me do it every week in front of everybody on the front desk. And even back then, I was 6 or 7 or maybe 8 or 9. And for some bizarre reason, and I can't work out why, but I already said to people back then, I want to be a teacher. Now, considering that I was having a horrible experience at school and it went on right through my senior school, again, picked on by teachers because I, to give the air quotes, couldn't do things. So my stereotype in my head had already formed. I'm an end of August birthday. Therefore, I'm nearly a year younger. I was nearly a year younger than every other person in my class. So already, and I didn't know it then, already potentially I was on a back foot because there was like 11 months between me and the rest of the class. So they'd had that bit more life experience. They knew things that, or had life experiences that I hadn't had yet, but I didn't know it then. So the stereotype had started to form. I got, if you like, branded. She's an end of August birthday. She's quite small. Thank you, Fatma. She's quite small for her age because, again, I wasn't very tall. She can't do maths and she's very quiet. And you kind of conform to the stereotype then, don't you? You slip into the background. You don't put your hand up. You don't answer questions. You don't say things. You don't make your opinion felt. Now, it's actually, to my internal shame, an awful lot later in my life did I realise I had a voice. I became a teacher, but I didn't get a teaching degree. So already I was like, if you like, one step lower than all the people that had teaching degrees. I was one of the last people into teaching in England who didn't have to have a degree. I had to spend the first year of my teaching qualification doing a maths course because I hadn't got a maths O-level. So again, I was back-footed. I then became that teacher and I sort of grew. That was when, and this was 1981, so a long time ago. Once I put my foot into that classroom, having sort of based everything that I believed in upon my horrible experience at school, I realised I didn't want the children that I taught to have those feelings too. So I gradually began to reframe my own narrative, if you like, because it started with me. I suddenly realised I'd found a thing that I was a little bit good at. Although at that point, I couldn't recognise myself as being good at anything. Because again, that's how we're framed as women sometimes, isn't it? You aren't good enough. Unfortunately, I ended up being married to somebody who also didn't necessarily see me as good enough for something, but that's another story. But I had 4 sons who are now grown adults. My eldest nearly 41, my youngest 29. I have 1 granddaughter, so Pam and I also now have something in common. And I don't want her to grow up having that very low opinion of herself. And so moving through, as I say, it's taken me more time than it should have done to rebrand myself. And the ultimate thing that got me into a completely different mindset was doing my MA. And I can't remember how long ago it is I did that now, but it's a long time. And I got out of my house every so often and went up to Sheffield University, the weekend schools. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, there are people out here who think like I do. There are people out here who see education like my teaching career, even as a senior leader. In fact, my deputy head at one point even said to me over a lunchtime conversation, "Do you honestly believe what you do works?" Again, made me feel very small. I made that breakthrough when I did MA at Sheffield University. And that's when I began to realize that we can start to reframe that narrative. And I have to say, I'm still a little bit insecure in all of that. My title of doctor, because after my MA, I went on to do a doctorate in early childhood education. And I'll come to the use of language in a minute, jargon and vocabulary. But for a long time on my professional signature, when I still worked in a local authority, I wouldn't put Dr. Sue Allingham on anything. And it took a colleague of mine to say, "But hang on a minute, why don't you say on your professional signature Dr. Sue Allingham?" I said, "Oh, no, nobody wants to know that." And she said to me, "But you worked on that. That took you 6 years. You deserve to write that on something." So now it's on there. But yesterday, when I was speaking at a conference, every time somebody introduces me as Dr. Sue or talks to me, "Oh, Dr. Sue, can I have a word?" it still hasn't quite sat right. So I really need to work on myself with that one, because I earned that title and it was flipping hard work. So basically, it's about owning that confidence, isn't it? We cannot help our accident of birth, if you like, that we were born female. But do you know what? That's really significant. And I think Pam and Fatma summed it up beautifully. And I liked Fatma's comment that men can't be without us, because if we weren't there, there wouldn't be any more men fundamentally, would there? I mean, I've had 4 sons, so I think I've done my bit for mankind or personkind or humankind. But we can't go too far the other way. And I've been listening a lot in the last, as I say, I had a conference yesterday, thinking about things in general. And it's that word early childhood. In England, early childhood education and care. We've moved forward. We've now started to say early childhood education and care. We don't talk so much about care. People don't go into early childhood care now, because that little word care defines how women are in that role. We're seen as babysitters, we're seen as childminders. And what is wrong with being a childminder, for goodness sake? That language is very powerful. Childminders are educators too. We're called practitioners. Well, forgive me, I won't use the word practitioner. It's used a lot in English terminology, UK terminology. In my head, the minute the word practitioner came into play, all I could think of was someone who is in the healthcare profession, which is a very honourable thing, but it's different terminology. We are teachers, we are educators. We need to change our professional vocabulary. We need to talk about ourselves as teachers. Yes, of course we care, but surely an element of education is care. Pam summed it up beautifully with working with family with children who have special educational needs and disabilities. If we didn't care, if those children and families were seen as numbers on a piece of paper or boxes to tick, we wouldn't have the right attitudes to work with those children. There's so much I want to say here. It's about professional confidence. This is where my colleague's book proof came in that I was reading. He's written about, the book is about professional confidence, and he's talking about showing up with clarity, compassion, and conviction. Now, we can do that. Men can do that too. So why aren't we seen as being equally as powerful? How do we use our knowledge? How do we use our informed perspectives, our research? Research I use slightly warily, because an awful lot of things out there are seen as, forgive, I keep doing air quotes at the moment, research, whereas actually it's somebody's opinion on the social media post. And that isn't research.
No.
And of course, we are really guilty of, I'm sure we've all done it, being quite, a lot of thumbs up suddenly started to appear. lots of we are in danger of reading only the research that suits our narratives. Yesterday's conference I was speaking at was fabulous because we had all sorts of different perspectives coming in. And I work with a wonderful colleague, and I travelled home on the train with him actually. And he and I clash about several things, but we have a professional debate and we get on very well. So it's that showing up and knowing your stuff, speaking with conviction. It's being able to navigate complexity, challenge, and the status quo and still be kind. It's not telling people what to do. The strap line on my professional account runs an inspirational trainer who listens, which is hugely embarrassing, but it was written about me. But you see what I've just done? It's hugely embarrassing. Why can't I own that? And if we don't listen, we're never going to get there. We're never going to actually understand people. Again, Pam summed it up.
Yeah, I think Dr. Sue, that is one of the most important thing which is missing in this world today is listening. And we are not listening to actually understand or comprehend. We are listening to react or respond immediately to things. So whether it's a situation, whether somebody saying something, or whether it is a person who's talking, we're not listening. We are listening either to answer back, respond, or react, but never to comprehend. And in case we can listen, I think the world would be a much better place. Dr. Sue, we're running out a little bit out of time. So
yes,
if you have some concluding remarks, please, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Smriti, because I have, like my predecessors in this conversation, so much to say. I think I would just end with, again, a quote from my friend's book Proof. Yes, we can change the narrative. Yes, we can reframe the narrative, but we mustn't go too far the other way. Thank you, Fatma, for saying that. It's not all about men against women. It's a together approach. But Lewis says in his book, it's the confidence to say something seems off. Are we sure this is okay? To question a more senior colleague. I used to get told a lot by a head teacher, it's non-negotiable. Whoa, no, it isn't. To challenge a culture of silence, to act, especially when no one else does. And I think I'm going to thank Lewis for that and buy his book when it comes out, because that is massive. Thank you, Smriti.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sue. That's a wonderful book that you are reading out the excerpts from, because everything is so relatable. And my sincere hugs to you, because like Miss Fatima mentioned in the chat box, and like I said, I think somewhere down the line, we've all gone through those kind of regimental teachings, and the teachers who are going to pick up on us and tell us that you're not good enough. And most of the children face that all the time. So like Dr. Sue said, in a very emotional and a very heartfelt, honest moment, that she said that these stereotypes are set much before we realize it, and we actually, we start accepting it as our own identity. So to break through that and to reframe the narrative, you take a lot more years than you should have taken, because we all do that and we go through that. And finally, when we do that, we feel like, at least let's do something to the younger generation, that they don't have to go through the same thing. Like she said, she would never want her granddaughter to face the same thing. So, the culture of silence has to be broken, of course, for sure. And yes, I have done my EYFS courses from UK and my cash level 5 also. Practitioner is a word that they, in England, they use, in UK, they use a lot. And that does not state an educator, nurturer, carer, change maker. There were so many other words. It's not exactly practitioner. So that is it. Yes, Dr. So I'm with you. Great. On. Let's go to the next question. And Dr. Vasavi, are we good with the Facebook thing, or do we want to
Yeah,
try
we are
it
good.
again?
I have shared in another profile.
Yeah.
And I've shared it in the ECDF forum. So yeah, it's visible.
Awesome. That's great. So let me head over to Miss Karen. Again, she's also from England, and let's see what she has to say. The question that I have for you, Miss Karen, is when did you realize leadership in education is not just about the administrative work, but it is about a vision, it's about the legacy building. So, like we have been talking about the aspects of leadership in in education and early childhood education. Most of the time, when we talk about leadership, it is given to the men because they feel that they're better administrators, and the more organized, or probably they can go towards those things. But it is much more. So, you being a leader yourself, when did you realize that it's not just the administrative or the admin work, it's much more of a vision. It's like a legacy that you're leaving behind for the others. Over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to start with just stating the obvious, but I think it is really important. UNESCO 2025, the gender report, Women Lead for Learning, shows clearly that global educators and education in general suffers an imbalance from women and leadership. So there is an imbalance. We know this already. Therefore, promoting women's leadership in education has both moral and ethical implications. So we can achieve balanced and socially responsive systems within education. And that's where, when I realised from a very early age, not similar to Sue, but there are some similarities. I am from a very disadvantaged background. Education was something that had to work really hard for, and all of the leaders that I encountered from a very young age and later on in life were male, and that was a big learning curve for me, because women leaders shape the collaborative and have a resilience-based mindset, and that's kind of me in a nutshell. I am very resilient. I'm not silent. I have times when I'm silent. In fact, my colleagues will say when Karen's quiet, that's where the trouble lies. I have a voice. I share my voice to all levels of leadership. I think that's a really important point. So, all levels of leadership, but also that deep listening. And there are, of course, exceptions in both women and male leaders, and we need to accept that, because there are lots of men that are wonderful leaders, and there are also lots of women that are not so wonderful leaders. But contemporary research suggests that women leaders are more likely to focus on education quality, that fostering inclusive collaborative learning environments that everybody's talked about today. We know that this focus is on the quality processes, which significantly leads to improved outcomes for children and families. Not improved data, improved outcomes. And I think that is really important. The focus for women as leaders and not as administrators is on the process. It's a strategic decision. Women leaders value and seek transparency. I am always asking about, well, can I see that? Where does that come from? Let's look a little bit more carefully. Let's listen. Let's find out. Always asking about the voice of the child, the voice of the family, and the voice of the community, which we've all talked about today. Women leaders emphasise critical thinking and that inclusive content pedagogy. Again, I'm repeating what everybody has already said, but I think it's important that we're all saying it. But also, from my perspective, my leadership ensures that research and advocacy influences the funding decisions that are made, that create those ecosystems that lead to sustainability, because that's the important. Bringing people with you is so powerful, isn't it? So as women leaders, we drive equity and justice, and that comes from the heart from me, because we need to remember that fair is not always equal. And I've had lots of situations where fair is definitely not equal. So sometimes you have to tip the balance, don't you? Which means that there are long-term commitments for access and for disadvantage for our families. And my leadership tends to focus specifically on shared responsibilities. It's about relationships. I talk a lot, and I've written very, very recently about elegant leadership. And it's not about being elegant. It's about first knowing yourself, being precise, clean, consistent, having intentional impact. So connecting those words with actions. We can all say lots and lots of things, but if we don't mean it, it's not intentional. Being authentic in our presence and mindful behaviours to work. So understanding, being as honest as we can, and transparency is key. So it's about connection, collaborativity, confidence, and competence. So as a young person and as a leader, I've led nurseries, I've led children's centres, I've led schools, and I'm a senior leader at the moment. I think women leaders are reformers, strategists, activists, researchers, resistors, and institutional architects. Always asking, so what, then what, and what if? Those are important questions. And I'll stop talking now because I think I've said everything that I needed to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Karen, and wonderful words for women leaders. The way you have described about the mindful behavior, about the intentional impact, about confidence, clarity, authenticity, and the way you have told us that, it's not just, you can't just call them leaders, but it is like basically they're reformers, they're strategists, they're, doing so much more. And I love the statement about that the focus is on outcomes and it's not just on, the things and the policies, but wonderful, wonderful. That was like, there was so much that I think all the participants or the listeners of this webinar would get to know that tomorrow, if you are aiming to be that leader in the education space, think on these lines. Think of yourself as a researcher, as a reformist, as a strategist, and then I don't think so there would be a kind of imbalance that UNESCO was talking about the male leaders and the female leaders. So can we be actually that good a leader? That's also something that we should be asking ourselves. And let's keep in mind the essential qualities that are required for a leader to be a leader like Miss Karen is. Very good. Thank you so much for your answers and giving us such beautiful words and you're sharing your thoughts because that was really empowering. All right. Now let me go to Miss Ambra. Miss Ambra, where does leadership development begin for women in early childhood education? So where do we see the beginning of it? And how does professional development and mentoring strengthen this journey? So do you actually think that, that the continuous professional development that we think about or having a mentor strengthens it? And where does it begin from? So is a teacher also a leader? Where does it begin from, actually? Over to you.
Yes, exactly. So definitely it looks like that tonight we redefine the concept of leadership in some way, because in the past, I think the stereotype is that leadership is actually dominance or having the control, while what we are saying tonight is that leadership actually needs to be redefined as in a role of nurturing and support and delegating, building trust, empowering others, right? So creating system where people can grow and take responsibility. So when we look at leadership from this perspective, straight away, I think that naturally we see how many of these qualities like we have in the education and in the school as a system, because even when we go into the classroom, even the educators are actually in a leadership position. They are gentle leaders. They are supposed to be gentle leaders, but even just managing the classroom, even building a small society of peers that are the children and being their facilitator in taking decisions and building community around the school, co-partnership with the parents. And then when we go into specific approach, like can be Reggio, of course, like then we see as teachers are actually, and educators are actually researchers as well. So from my perspective, when we talk about professional development, I really believe that we need to look into that. So we need to empower educators in embrace this role that goes beyond care and being a caregiver. And as some of you were saying before, of course, caring is important, and there is so much, I have so much respect for this. However, being an educator goes so much beyond that. It required so many different and much more skills, and we want to bring more respect in early childhood education, and let understand what is the work that is behind every day. What does it happen in a classroom every day? Because so many things are happening. There is a lot of learning. There is a lot of research, a lot of observations, and this is also why we want to be careful, as some of you were saying before, in when we choose specific words instead than others. And going back to professional development, as I don't want to go out like too far from it, definitely like needs to include these skills, this embracing and empowerment of the educators, and on the other side needs to meet the educators where they're at. So from my perspective, sometimes professional development, as I see, sometimes is very theoretical. While me, because I've been a teacher for 10 years in Italy, and then I became a principal, and then I opened my own school, and I see, and I'm in the classroom every day. I want to stay in the classrooms. And even as consultant, I sometimes lead sessions with the children, facilitate sessions with the children, as I need to experience what the educators are experiencing, because we need to meet them where they are at. And this is the way to empower them, to allow them to go back in the classroom and know what they're doing, and becoming confident and feeling competent, and sometimes even just have that vision, and holding that vision of them, to show them where they can arrive, when they meet with the parents, and feel competent in what they're saying, and having reflections behind that moment, having some time to reflect together, to reflect with the principal, to reflect with their pedagogical consultant, to reflect within the team. I feel it's definitely important for them, and to feel themselves and move from the concept of themselves as caregiver to professionals, researchers, co-researchers, as some of you were saying before, co-partners with parents, co-partners and co-researchers with the children, with their colleagues. And then when we go into the gender, as we are here into women leadership, of course, like when we talk about education, we know that the majority that is shaping education are actually women. And the majority of us are actually women. And when we talk about leadership as nurturing, and in this empathetic role, community builders, then we can see how women can actually have a critical point in shaping and creating a big revolution around the concept of leadership. Because and honestly, I had a different experience compared to Karen, for example. Like, I'm a business woman as well. I'm a consultant, but I'm also a businesswoman. And the majority of business that I do it with other women. And so I often meet other women in leadership positions as well. And I can see how, in some way, I always say about me, like, now that I'm old, let's say, and if it will be for me, I will have 5 children, but I have right now just 1. And probably I won't have any other more, but I love to build. And this is still my mother part. I love to build like containers, let's say, that are welcoming families, that are still nurturing families, that are still gathering places where families can go and meet. And is so much part, I feel, of being a woman and a leader as well. So yeah, like I had also recently, I want to say, a discussion with someone that was telling me that the right kind of education doesn't produce leader. So it depends how we see leaderships, like is leadership dominance. And then, of course, yes, education has to shoulder resist to this in some ways. But if we see leadership as we define it tonight, then I really believe that is then about empowering and holding visions, and then this perhaps begins with women in leadership positions, that they can help systems through empathy and like emotional relational intelligence, and lead hopefully an evolution, a revolution that is happening through education as well.
Correct. Thank you so much, Ms. Ambra, for
Thank
sharing
you.
those thoughts with us. Yes, leadership does begin at the teacher's level, a gentle leadership. What Ms. Ambra said, that, she's shaping the future of the children in her class, and she is leading that class for that time, So everyone in an educational setup, everyone is a leader at every space and time that they are in. And of course, empowerment is very, very important. And what she mentioned, one more point was that, yeah, we talk about a lot of nurturing and care, giving and everything as women leaders or in education space, which is sometimes to be mistaken. So for early childhood educators, they always feel that, we are just the caregivers. What else do you do? What else does a child do in school when they're like, just below the age of 5? So it's not like they don't realize the developmental milestones or the setting up of the foundational of ethics and values and what the teachers are doing. And I definitely like the thing of, that bigger revolution and the co-partnership that Ms. Ambara talked about today, of being a woman leader. And, from there, strengthening, empowering the teachers through continuous professional development, and let's all be mentors to the fraternity of education. Thank you so much, Ms. Ambra,
Thank
for that. Right. Now, Ms. Baiba has been listening to everyone very, very patiently, and we will see going to over to Ms. Baiba. So we spoke so much about women leadership today and our role in the education system. According to you, where do you see the greatest gender gaps in educational leadership today? What I mean to say is it in the classrooms or the policy spaces, the management boards, or the community, or the systems itself? So if you could just throw some light on that where should you find this imbalance that Ms. Karen was also talking to us about, that the UNESCO reports suggest that imbalance. So where do you find these gaps? Which areas have you seen it?
To answer, I would like to start before with some examples. I would like to answer as practitioner, as a founder of kindergarten and trainer teachers, and also as social entrepreneur. I am entrepreneur. And the first story, when I was leader of my kindergarten, we had 4 men in our kindergarten. And that is where this is a very good result, because in our country, in all education institutions, there are only women. And so it's not enough to have a man in education institution. And could you imagine 86 children can have opportunity to talk every day in kindergarten with men? Swimming pool trainer, sport trainer, cooker, he was a man, and special and man who helped to fix environment. And they were involved in education process. The cooker, the man who made a meal for us, he always involved in communication with children. He was not only in a kitchen, and that was amazing situation. And then I became brave, and one man wanted to become a teacher for 3 years old children. And could you imagine what parents said to me? They said, no, we are not going to allow men to go in your classroom. These children are too small to allow a man be every day with them. And I was thinking, why? What's wrong? Why so huge stereotypes? And then I understood, because to be good teacher with in early childhood, we have to have good emotional intelligence. We have to have good observation skills. We need to react with empathy, with huge love. I could compare that with riding a horse. I used to ride a horse, and I know if I am looking at horse and I feel the horse, I can communicate with him with my body. I can lead him. I can give a discipline, but with huge love, with huge understanding what my horse wants. And that is something women have more skills than men. Men are mostly resolves problems. And maybe that stereotype was the biggest reason why our parents didn't allow us to have a man in classroom with children who have 3 years. And the third story is about social enterprise. Mostly social entrepreneurs in our country are women. Why? Because we resolve social problems, and the laws say if you are social entrepreneur, you cannot reach out money, no profit. All profit you have, you need to reinvest for this social aim. And we wanted to change this law, and I went to our state, and we started to do these changes in the law. And there are men, and they said, why do you need a profit? You do social work. Profit need other entrepreneurs. We won. We got this. We changed a law in our system, and now social entrepreneurs can have profit. But this is a good example of mindset. If you do something social, you have to be social and stay without beneficiaries, stay without something good and some extras. Why I am talking about that in this question? Because actually I see that greatest gap is between practical wisdom and formal power. In education, women they deeply understand children. They understand what is learning readiness. They understand children's attention, emotional regulation, and the need of families, because they work closely every day in everyday reality. But expertise is not equally transferred into a policy. We don't design system based on this practical work. And actually, I believe that education system could become stronger if those practical women teachers could be very close with policymakers. So, in short, my answer is the huge gap between genders are between practical wisdom and formal power and policy making, and also in classrooms.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Baiba. And I love the fact that she started the the gender gap with the prejudice towards men being teachers in early childhood education. So it was not like the gender gap started again with the women thing, but it started with the men not being allowed to be teachers for young children. Yeah, there are reasons for that. Like we had been discussing throughout the evening that, men probably need training for that. And for women, it is quite instinctive. They understand children better, which Ms. Baiba also said. But yeah, that is a very, very sad situation that if we all face, that if you are a women entrepreneur and, you are starting off with, a business of your own, and if we're talking about social work needs to be profitable for us to do more social work and make a better community and a better world. And I'm damn sure that Dr. Wasabi knows all about it. And you know how it's looked down upon is that if you're an NGO, a non-government organization or a non-profit organization, so don't make profit, you're not a business. Why, if we don't make money, then how do we help other people? Tell us that. So that's a very, very important aspect. So over to you, Dr. Vasavi, with my last question. And thank you so much, Ms. Baiba, for sharing your thoughts with us. And the last question for Dr. Vasavi is that first, she's going to talk about this kind of a social stigma against the social entrepreneurship and profit making. And then she's going to tell to us that who are the women or the mentors who shaped her leadership journey, who, inspired her to do what she's doing today and making such a big difference in the world. And what were the most significant barriers that she faced as a woman in education leadership? And how did the influence help her to break these barriers and create this wonderful platform of ECDF for all of us? Over to you, Dr. Vasi.
Thank you, Smriti, and thank you to all the speakers, because there was so much that was shared today, from all the earlier speakers that I've heard, and they shared a lot in terms of, the stereotypes that we face, women leadership in education, the kind of, biases that were there, that they had personally faced and also faced during their work life. Coming to, yes, taking forward what Baiba had said, when it's a social entrepreneurship, what kind of, expectation people has. Now, when I talk about ECDF, see, we get our funds by doing all the events that we do, like, all our paid events, we are also training teachers, we are doing a lot of things like, trying to give out membership, we are also fundraising, and that is to help the people around. Now, the fact that people consider it, from another point of view, that a social entrepreneurship should not be an NGO should not be a profit-making thing. It actually is not the right thing, because organizations like ours do not go to the corporates or to the government for funding. We generate our own funds, and we use the fund in helping children who are from the not so fortunate background. So that is number one. Number two, tender petals. Now, when Baiba talked about entrepreneurship per se, as in, in the education industry, there are a lot of challenges, because when we talk about a chain of preschools, it's still in India being dominated by the men, because when we talk about preschool owners, owner of a chain of preschool, I'm not talking about the facilitators. Of course, in the classroom, there are women, and that is what we are looking at now. But what are we, when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's the male dominated place. And I have seen a lot of biases here during my journey, But again, I will go back to my childhood and the people and the women I've met and all, even men who inspired. I would not, uh, negate the role of men also in my life, but the women who have inspired me per se to face these challenges. In Tender Petals, yes, when I launched the chain, first of all, my biggest challenge was that it was a chain from Northeast India. India being a very big country and Northeast being away from the mainland was a challenge for me. And our people would always want a brand which was from mainland India. So that challenge was number one. And then these big brands with very big, people behind it, big industries, big organizations behind them. They were really doing good, but I could see that our work was rewarded. I worked for 10 years relentlessly, and now we have many strong centers who are running very well. And I have seen that yes, one can emerge victorious, and it is about not giving up. There were many times when I felt that no, I think I should give up, but the last straw I would always hold on to, and that would take me to my, further in my journey. Coming back to my childhood and women who have inspired me, first of all, it was my mother. I lost my father very young, and we were a family of four daughters and my mom. And she was, a homemaker. But after my father expired, she studied, she got a job of a professor. And I had seen her struggle, and we were like her backbone. So though we were very young, she always used to, kind of take our opinions, and we were valued. So we could understand that every person in the family had a value. They could add something to the family. So we were very democratic in our setup, and being a fully girl kind of a, household, we did not have any kind of male presence or domination. So as a result, the stereotypes I never faced personally. But then when we went out to study, when I had gone to Delhi to study, I could sense that yes, there were a lot of stereotypes attached to women in our society. And I'm very fortunate that I belong to the northeast of India, which is a very matrilineal kind of society where women are really, really kind of, prayed. We have our goddesses like Lakshmi, Durga. Of course, there are households that have these kind of stereotypes, but generally, overall, if we look at it, we come from a very westernized, very inclusive society, per se. So I was an avid reader, so I read Virginia Woolf from a very young age, and I was really inspired by her books. And when she said that every woman needs a room of her own, we need it. We need to make our space. We can't be always the giving person. We have to be in a way, because we are multitasking, but at the same time, we need to know how to prioritize ourselves. And then I also read Ismat Chugtai, a woman author, and she really wrote um, against the gender stereotypes, the societal pressure that a woman has. And she was not really at that time, she wasn't very accepted, but then she won a Padma Shri, and she was somebody who really left a imprint in my mind. And then last but not the least, a little I would talk about entrepreneurship before I wind up. But we have this Kamakhya temple, a temple in the northeast of India, which is of a Devi goddess, and she is a menstrual goddess. She is a goddess that bleeds every year, and we pray. And at that time, there are lots and lakhs of people who come to this region, because there's a lot of power in that. At that time, the DT already has power, but when she's in that menstrual cycle, she's prayed, like lakhs of people come. And that was a time when I had visited a temple with my mom when I was young, and I told her that, it's such a shame, because we were always taught that this is something that we should be shy about. And my mom had told me, it is not something to be shy about, it's our power. And you need to understand the power of a woman. And if you understand that, you can always, be the best version of yourself without getting dominated, without living your life to to the fullest. And Ma Kamakhya has been my inspiration all my life. And I often visit her shrine. And yes, I think that we need to teach our boys a lot of things, because they need to understand, where a woman is coming from. Very recently, I watched this lovely poetry recitation by a girl who said that she was always told a story by her grandmom, that there's a Prince Charming who would be coming and, taking her out of all the troubles, give her the best. But then the Prince Charming never knew that he had a role like that. And so it's very important that we educate our boys, and try to make them more gentle in their approach towards women. So we need to make space. There's enough space, but we need to make space for each other, love each other, teach each other empathy, compassion. And I think that is all about it, that I wanted to share. And I think we have crossed the time as well. Thank you so much.
Well, Dr. Vasvi, that was really, really amazing. Yes, of course, the power of women and womanhood. And of course, being in a family right from a very early age where they were all women definitely gave you an edge over the others, because you only face the stereotypes when you went to Delhi. That is like during, after your younger foundation stage was all founded and well made. And I love the sentence that, yeah, somebody please tell those Prince Charmings that they have a responsibility to actually take away all the troubles from us. Nobody's telling them. We're just expecting it. And poor girls and women, they're just waiting for that Prince Charming to turn up in the white horse, and nobody's turning up. And nobody's turning up because they don't know about it. So let's please educate the boys that they have a responsibility of caring and nurturing towards the society, towards the women in their household, in their communities, and the children as well. So, like Baiba also said that, there should not be any gender stereotypes. It's all about intentional. It's all about intentional impact that we have been discussing throughout in the evening. And thank you so much to all the speakers who really changed a lot of perspectives today. And there was so much of honesty in our conversation, and there was so much of, it was kind of coming out of the mold and, talking about things that probably we don't get to talk every day. So I think this Women's Day, Dr. Wasabi, was specifically special. Thanks to ECDF for giving us this platform where we could actually have a voice, talk about what we were feeling, and the way we see and design the world and the leadership in the community. So thank you, everyone. Signing off. Until we meet again, thank you very much for attending and being participative and for sharing your thoughts. It was very enlightening. Thank you. Good night.